Yeah, I'm just going to let Courtney kind of take this, but we're going to talk a little bit about the integration that we have built. Like I said, our background was student info, or our CEO and COO, their background was SunGard Higher Education, and so that's kind of where we're coming from, the types of things that we've built in. We've had any number of people just tell us, hundreds of hours that it saves them in many cases to do that. We generally would have more of a detailed discussion. We've had, I think we continue to have clients who use the ILP. And so it's not an all or nothing. I mean, if you want to continue to use the ILP, we work in that environment as far as that goes. We have had people, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Courtney, that have said that they were going to stay with the ILP, and then as they work with us like 1, 2, 3, 4 months in and just said there's some things that you do more efficiently and have swapped after an ILP implementation, and there's probably some that we're still using for the ILP and some of the types of things that it would do. But our integration really is focusing on where are the connection points between Moodle and the student information system. And so if there are other uses for the ILP that kind of go outside of that, which I understand sometimes there are, then it's certainly part of that consideration. But our intent here at this next point was to kind of go through those types of details, I think, to show how easy that integration is, how it can be maintained as real time, how we do that, and the other little, I don't know what you call them, pieces of technology that we have built in, because again, it came from a customer demand as to some of the things that we wanted to add to. But again, as we continue to do this, we're not really customizing Moodle to say that it's something that goes away or that we modify, but it's like adding to blocks and things like that as far as how we make that integration work. So I think we'll kind of start at that. I don't know how you want to walk through that, but I'm not going to do much more of an introduction than that, and we'll kind of show you the pieces of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought we'd start with the integration, because that's kind of where we left off, and talk about the integration with colleague, and then let's continue that to talk about any of the other sort of more technical kind of pieces. So obviously we hit on EDFS just briefly, so unpack some of that if we want to, and any of the like plugins or integrations with other kinds of tools. So that sounds like a good plan. Okay. So what I thought I'd do is show the integration first for a couple different clients, kind of give you a feel for how that works. As Mark mentioned, we do have clients who still use ILP. So Loyola, for example, uses ILP. That's fine. It's not end of the world for us. You're not going to crush our hopes and dreams if you want to stay the course. So they have a whole team. They've been using this forever, and so when they moved over to us, they stayed the course for now. We continue to kind of have conversations though, because there are things that they would like to do a little differently. This client does use our integration. They use all the pieces of it, which is why I use them as my example here, so we don't have to bounce around sites too much. So this is more college. So what you'll see here is the course names in here. We talked about sort of course creation, or at least we started touching on it a little bit. So one thing to note here is that it is completely custom in terms of how we put your category structure together, how we name your courses, all of those pieces. So what you're seeing right here is in the site administration, we've added a page called the Open Course Categories page. It has text that I'm pretty certain no one ever reads. They just skip right past it, which is fine. One of the things that we do try to encourage everyone to do is to wait until your lovely registrar has everything, or most of everything set. So most of our sites, we don't have it sort of turned on automatically. So when you start building courses for the next term or 3 terms out, it's not building those in Moodle just yet. So this is where you control that flow. So we do encourage people, because I did verify, she tells me that the course name does not update currently, so the full name does not go back and pull the new full name if you change that. The way that it works is if it finds a short name that has a match in the integration, then it does nothing. But if it finds one that it can't match against in Moodle, it'll create a new section. So if you change the structure of the short name in Moodle, if it were to have the location in the short name, then it would trigger building a new course section in Moodle. So that's how they currently have it configured. Because it sees it as a whole separate, it automatically does the enrollments then as well.
Unless we did something.
Well, it would pull them out. So it would pull them out of the first one that it built. So if it was set up as hybrid, for example, and it enrolled 15 students in the hybrid course as it was, accumulating, and then you went in and switched that to online and it changed the short name, it would then say, oh, I don't see this course anymore. Those people don't need to be in there. And it would build the course for the online and push them automatically provision the course. Yes.
Right now, I run a process. So when I change the name, it's still got that same site number we were talking about.
Right. Because the ILP uses that as the identifier there.
So if we didn't have that, you're talking if there's no ILP.
Right, right. So I'm talking no ILP. I'm talking cut the cord. Let's look at our integration for a few minutes. Weed whacker, whatever you want to use. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of different pages here just so that you begin to get a sense, because you mentioned location was kind of a key.
We use that in our, we use LN for Lincoln,
right.
LN01 and ML for Milford.
Yep. Let me pull up Baker, because Baker has a similar situation in Kansas. They've got all these different campuses, and so their category structure is going to look very different to you because they use the category structure as kind of the top level, and then the courses are under there. So this one, as you can see, 2017s are in there. You'll notice the checkboxes next to it. The checkbox is really the trigger that says, I'm ready for you to start creating these courses in Moodle. So what you see here is CE Spring is not created. So CE Spring exists in their student information system, but it does not exist in Moodle. And they have the option to turn it on or not. So it's up to them. So some of our institutions use Moodle just for their online courses, but it sees everything in there, but it only pulls over the online. So you've got a lot of sort of flexibility in there about what you wanted to create if you want there to be limits. We don't charge you based on number of courses in there. So we do have schools that they only require and will get used for their online courses. They generate a shell for every single course that gets taught, whether they use it or not. So you're not limited to the number of course sites that it builds. So back to what I was just mentioning to you is if it builds a new section, that old section is going to sit there dormant. We don't care.
But it takes the students out of the old one and moves them to the new one. If that gets changed on student account conversion.
Well, it builds the course and then it looks at the enrollments in the course. So the first thing the integration does is says, is there a course for this? And then if there's not a course, it builds the course and it says, what are the enrollments for this course? And it adds them.
So if a student is registered as HB, the course gets changed, the student is still on HB. How are we going to know to put it in that? That's not to change on each student.
So that's tied to the student record. It's not tied to the.
I know.
Okay.
When you change the name, do you change
student enrollments point to the new course, or it just changes the name? And the
We
students?
typically go in and change it on each student. If it happens after, you know, the one we had was, it happened after the fact, after the course started.
Yeah.
But
Right, and then we have to go in and change it on each one of the students. So they're not-
Right, but in college,
You know, we just change it the number after.
but in college, you really wouldn't have to change it because college just thinks, okay, these students, 15 students are enrolled in this course. If I change the name in college, they're still enrolled in the same course. So there's nothing really that has changed for the student in college.
So when you said the first one stays dormant, the enrollments are still there, right? The students that were there, the instructor are still enrolled in the order. So for the instructor, he's going to be seeing two shows.
No, it pulls the enrollments out because
It
it
pulls
doesn't,
them.
yeah, because it doesn't see that the course exists
Okay.
anymore.
Right.
So it would just be in Google, kind of an orphaned course section.
So then admin can see it.
Delete it if you want to, yeah. So this is the one I mentioned, that their course category structure looks quite different. So this is the same page, open course categories, different theme, obviously it looks a little different, but you'll notice here, accelerated business programs is pulled out as its own, and Baldwin City with each term, and Overland Park with each term. So that's, I mean, I am not the girl that's going to do your integration piece, but that might also be potential to think about, is how to organize the category structure to where it might not matter.
That provision for all. So we enter our schedule and then I run the process and it runs it for all the meetings.
Okay.
So typically, if there is an issue with the class, I'm the go-to person in administration to work with.
Okay.
So the category that you're showing here, that means that each campus is doing their own. No.
It just means that instead of looking at just the term code for the category, we're also looking at the location. So what that then does is helps them have their courses organized by that same structure. So the category structure follows those locations. So when I drill into Topeka, then I see all of the, wait, don't use that anymore. Overland. So when I go into Overland, then that's what their course name stream looks like in their case. So and again, you know, I'm not claiming to know what would be the best option. My team that does the integration work does this every day with different clients. We've even had clients who, this term we had two for some reason, they changed their SIS between terms. So they were like, can you help us get that working now? And so our team did. I mean, we understood, you know, their structure enough, and we understood the SIS enough to be able to rework their integration, and they didn't really speak. So let me show you a couple of other things here. So this is the open course categories. This is how it triggers to begin creating the courses and managing the enrollments in those courses.
So would somebody from IT go in and start that then? Like right now, I run that process, but I mean, is that, if we get rid of the ILP, would that be set up that it would automatically would set those stuff up?
Yes.
On a certain date, that can be done.
So it's dependent on that check. So so either you could tell IT to do, you know, say, okay, I think we're ready, you know, next Monday, let's start creating the shells in Moodle. Or as you know, Moodle has a really flexible role system. So another option is that if you still want to be the person that oversees that, then you would just have a role that lets you go in and manage that. We actually have several registrars. Different campuses have their registrar as one of their admins because you guys handle this side of it. And you know, and so then this is another screen that you have access to. So the sync status page. So what this is doing is, let me kind of back up and explain kind of broad picture because I'm going into more depth than I normally would on kind of an initial pass through the integration. So you go in, check the box, hit save on that screen. Then what happens? Let's say you did that right now, 10:30 today. So what would happen is the next time a student or a faculty member logs into Moodle, it's going to query colleague and say, what courses is this person supposed to be in? Does that course exist? Is that person in that course? If it's not, it creates the course, it adds them into the course. So what you have is from 10:30 today until that nightly sync runs, it's just adding courses and enrollments all throughout the day, kind of piecemeal one at a time. This runs every night just to make sure that everything gets matched up. So it's always the case that within 12 hours or within 24 hours, everything is completely accurate. But it is checking those enrollments. So faculty member logs in, it triggers it, it's going to update the enrollments. So it's nice that it is real time. It goes and checks them.
But we would still have to enroll the student on our side. They log in.
Oh,
But
yes.
it still has to happen.
It still has to happen through the SIS. The SIS still controls that enrollment. Yes, absolutely. Yes, you still have the power, and then we always try to push back and say the SIS is of record. You know, it can be set to where people can manually add people in, but then they will show enrollment in two ways essentially. So it will show a manual enrollment, and it would show their SIS. So if they dropped from the SIS, it will take them out, but the manual enrollment would stay. So we usually our default is that we have that turned off. So faculty can't do the adds and drops, but admins are able to. So those situations where there's weirdness, they can get them in. But so what you're seeing here is the course sync status, the enrollment sync status, and then you're seeing two more. So one of the other pieces that we've added to the integration is the ability to pass information back, okay? Not required, obviously, if this isn't something you want to pursue or you don't want to pursue now, you don't have to. But what this does is it basically will use the attendance module in Moodle to send attendance records back to the SIS, and then also grades back to the SIS. You'll notice that there's a run and a test. That's because these are not triggered by login. So if I log in, it's not triggering a pass back of my grades or attendance. So we put those in there so that in the situations where you just want to verify that it looks good to you, you want to try a test run again, or as you're coming up to census date for attendance, for financial aid stuff, and as you're coming up for grades being due, we want you to be able to go in and run it more frequently if you need to get those kind of moving and not wait for the nightly sync. So let me show
You could run those manually and set them up on hourly.
So this is set up to run nightly.
So it would run. So if we wanted to run grades the day they're due every hour, we would have to manually.
I think we've increased that for a couple people, but I don't know what the frequency is. My understanding though is that if you guys move toward ethos, I believe that ethos will be real time for all of it. Let me show you the grade screen. So we too have added in another screen into the grader report. So this is the midterm final grade entry page. And so just to give you a sense of what it's doing here, it is not automatically sending grades back from the Google gradebook. So it is not scraping the course total and shooting that back. I worked on college campuses too long for that to ever work, right? So what this does is it really just provides them the entry screen so they're not having to log in both places. The other thing this is doing is that you'll notice it's pulling over the credit type. So if they're taking this as for credit or they're taking it pass-fail, they're taking it audit, it will show that credit type. So it's pulling that from the SIS and showing it here. The other thing it's then doing is it's using that credit type to control what's going to appear in the dropdown for that student. Okay? So in this case, midterm grade entry for this institution is just a satisfactory, unsatisfactory at midterm time. So all these are credit types, so that's what's going to show in that dropdown, satisfactory, unsatisfactory. The final grade is also going back to the credit type. So if it's just for pass-fail, it's only going to give them the options that the SIS wants for pass-fail. And if it's obviously for credit, it's giving them whatever the options are coming over from the SIS for them. So what happens is the, yay, and so the course total is pulling the course total from the Moodle gradebook so that the faculty member sees it right there on the screen, lined up with that student. So they just see it all in one spot and they're able to say, you know, 96.84 is an A+, or whatever their case is. It also allows the faculty member to do their modifications without it, you know, controlling based on that number percent.
So right now,
Yes.
a student receives a failing grade. The instructor also has to input the last day they attended the class.
Okay.
For financial aid.
Okay.
So, like you said, they can still enter it there. When they enter the failing grade. Yeah, when they enter the F, they can still, we can have a column still that shows that last day of attendance.
Yeah, I don't think they did attendance. I think I was just going to show you another custom. Drop my files. I'm just going to show you this one. I don't think it's the date, like I mentioned, but I'll just give you a sense of what another kind of customization that this client might look like. So this is an example of one that's customized even further. So in their case, theirs isn't the date, their last date of attendance. Theirs is the extension date. So if a student receives, do what? Okay. So if they receive an incomplete grade, they mark the grade that is the incomplete final grade, and then they add the extension date for the cutoff when they have to have that complete by. So this again is just another example of another customization.
I know this was a question of a different presentation earlier, but with that extension date, with how they type it in, will it allow them to put they type in wrong? Well, that was something that I should, I don't know.
It's forcing me. So it's just, in this case, it's just requiring, so I can add, I don't know.
So maybe it goes year, and then
We have a lot of, let's say, the quarter is, or the date on the class, the instructor thought ended one day, but really in the year, and it's a day before. That's what the issue is. They're trying to put in that last date that they thought it was. And they get an A,
Okay.
and the grade is blank, but that
Yeah,
stop
this is-
them from putting that in.
Yeah, I don't know if this stopped me, but I'm not familiar with the way that's coded in. So in this case, they would just save these, and then in the next run, it's going to pick them up and process them.
Unless we run it.
Yeah, but it'll just sit there until it gets run either nightly or during the course. Yeah. So one of the other things we might want to talk about settings. So in terms of these course shells that get created, you guys determine what those courses should look like, what they should be like. So at this point in Moodle, we're able to pull over obviously the start and end date. We personally at eThink have always done that, but Moodle's now added it into the end date is now part of Moodle as well. So we pull over those start and end dates from the SIS as well.
Dates that we have a problem with it comes as a negative. How are you?
The
So
date.
we had, yeah, so we had actually. When I use
Came over from ILP that way, but it's not stored in the SIS that way, right?
Well, that's where we have that. It's the same screen the way that the
Okay. I don't know why I'm pulling in. Right. We've pulled start and end dates for as long as we've had
That's
it.
how their shall expire. Goes with for item.
We can. So that's part of
I'm
the.
sorry, I didn't mean to-
No, that's fine. That's part of the integration. So we have some options that we can set up. So things like making the course sites available. One of the things that institutions have trouble with is that students don't see the course in Moodle because the faculty member forgets to make it visible. And so then that, registrar receives calls about that.
Every quarter.
Every quarter. So one of the things we can do is set it up so that course shells become available at whatever the business case is. So for some institutions, it's a week before the start date, so students can go in and see what the textbook is and do whatever introductory stuff. For some institutions, it's the date that the course starts. For some, it's the day after. It just really depends on the business case. There are some other pieces too, so like determining if you want courses to be set for topics or weekly formats by default. The start and end date will now build the right number of sections for the weeks. So if it's a 16-week course, it figures that out and it builds that number into the course. Trying to think of the pieces that are part of the integration. It can look to a template course, so if you've got stuff that you want built into the course across the board, we can add that in as well. Block configurations, those types of pieces can be built in when it generates those. What are you using for, I'm shifting gears slightly, what about course evaluations? What do you think?
Acknowledgement, right? Course evaluation, course acknowledgement.
Yeah, I just know it's titled, What Do You Think?
Oh, what do you think is
Yeah.
the title? Okay.
Like the orient, but it might be
Okay.
connected with college.
College Net. Okay. All right. Is that integrated in Moodle or they pass back out to do that separately?
Well, we are now using LTI.
Okay.
That created some issues where student can see,
Right.
the student ID, you can see the other structure.
Okay.
So we just
Okay. So last piece to the integration, and then we can move on from there, is observer mapping. So I think Mark mentioned this in the earlier session, but this is basically a way for you to map in deans, department chairs, librarians, academic support, whoever needs that level of mapping. We usually use a role called observer. That's why it's called manage observers, kind of historically for us. Usually the observers can go in, they can see in the course, but they can't modify things with that role. So it just gives deans and department chairs that visibility if they need to go in and check on things or verify what's going on in there. So the way this works too is that it's a front end screen for you, relatively easy. It allows you to enter the course prefix that you want mapped, and then the role that they should have, and then their user information from the SIS and their name. So the reason why this is really helpful is if you have a dean or department chair, they're assigned in this way. Anytime a new course shell gets created, they automatically have that observer access. Observers courses are not going to show in their My Courses list, so it's not going to be the case that they're going to have 900 course sections in their My Courses list, because most of them are also teaching, and they would come at you with pitchforks if we handled it that way. So they'll have access to it through the category structure directly to the courses, but not showing up in their list. Any other questions about the integration?
Yeah. The admin that was before me contacted Google, and they said they don't read students at all time from Google database. Students and instructors, everybody that was dropped since day one, they will always be
So the case that all the users still are in the system?
Correct.
Yeah, we won't remove anybody. We can keep all of them.
But is the way to Google?
Yeah, we can. We usually don't encourage to delete users out, because then, it just leads to other issues. But we do have a lot of institutions that throw the flag to suspend them, to put them in kind of a suspended state. What that allows for is you completely delete someone, and then they come back with I don't know what your limitation for grade disputes and that kind of stuff is, but if you remove them from the system completely, then if someone comes back, it's going to be more difficult to try and piece that back together.
What's your use case? Why do you want to do that?
Well, because everything goes to colleague, the final repository for all the information. Once you're done from the course, you will never be able to go back and check your grades in Google after you review the course of Google. So when you want to check the grades, you put a colleague organizer.
How long are you keeping courses right now before you purge?
We actually purge from Portland.
So then do your individual faculty have their backups?
They do, and I do.
Okay.
So we have all the backups since we were talking about.
Okay.
For our reasons, again, there's not a space restriction, so that's why you won't be charged more. That is.
And that brings another question: is you said there is no cap for the space, so we're keeping the shells there, right? The instructors have access to them. So how do they use to organize the list of courses that they have? Huge list that span years and years. Do you have an ability to customize that list?
Yeah, we've got a couple different approaches depending on your institution. Lately, because they've changed that course block, the course overview block, to have the current or in progress and then past and future, that's helping because it kind of kicks them out of the way. But the My Courses list is still potentially long. This is one of the things we're going back and forth with headquarters about how exactly to fix this, because there are different approaches that we can take. We do have a couple of blocks that other institutions prefer to use, so it just allows, some of them it allows the faculty member or the user to go in and customize their own list. some it lets you just determine what should be in the list. We do, like Baker that I pulled up a few minutes ago about the integration. You saw their courses are pretty old, right? Those 2011, 10, something like that. So one thing that we did with them is that they do have an archive category that they move the courses into, and that archive category also hides it from the faculty member. So the enrollment stays, the course stays, it's basically. Yeah, so it basically just puts it behind the scenes so you guys can get to it if you need to, you know, make it available. But it's still sitting there, so you don't have to grab all backups.
It's a workaround. There's no real customization that section. They want a customize it themselves. They want to move some courses out down or organize them in different ways. Don't know like that. We will take that's not.
It's not, but some blocks, some of the course blocks do a lot for them to change the order. We even have one client that has a block that it actually moves courses into the list based on how often they go into it. So it's basically like a most recent or most viewed. So it constantly is reorganizing them. I would find it dreadful, but they love it. It's all preferences. I know, are we? You're still good? Okay, okay. So what about other integrations? I know we've talked around single sign-on. Where are you guys with that currently? ADMS? Not working.
Didn't work. We have Google Rooms, all that sort of thing. They have a problem.
Okay.
So they said there's no fix.
Okay.
Because this last update also broke so many other things that we're trying to fix.
What are some of the other things?
Well, Google Drive, and now we have to convert the site to HTTPS. Where HTTP?
Okay.
For that will work. Modal grader, cursor is not working. Doesn't convert from document to PDF.
Okay. So do they have it disabled then?
What?
The assignment grader? Or it just isn't converting?
It just doesn't, it doesn't convert. It doesn't let you
Blank screen?
grade in a line.
Yeah, blank
Like
Unless the students go in and they convert the file or save the file.
save it as a PDF and put it in.
And then all the instructor is download the files.
I think that isn't happening for everybody. Because I just
It,
kind of
dogs. That yesterday, it worked for a little bit. It worked, and I saw it working. And then went back to check on it. And it didn't work. Huh?
it works sometimes. That's just sort of. Yeah, it had that.
That means it's working.
Yeah.
If it just worked a little bit.
So I will say we have clients using all of the things that you just mentioned. The document conversion was a little sticky. I mentioned that a little bit briefly. We've actually moved all our clients where the Google API does the conversion, and we've seen huge performance improvements. Part of the reason why it works sometimes and doesn't work sometimes is because there's basically a clog in the system. It's probably converting something that it can't convert, and so it gets stuck. So they probably have a process that unsticks it, and that's why you're seeing work sometimes, doesn't work other times. ADFS is not a problem. We have a ton of clients who are using it currently. I think part of what we would talk with you about is how you want it to work. So do you want people to go to the hub and then go to Moodle from there? Or when they hit the Moodle URL, will it kick them, let them log in, and just kick them right back? So those are all pieces that we talk through when we go to set you up and figure out the right sort of combination. Does everyone have an ADFS account, or like continuing ed and those pieces? Are those separate manual
We're using
accounts?
here. That's the vacuum, Azure and AWS.
Okay,
That's mainly why we work.
because you were trying to do two authentication.
Well, no, the piece for me to move directly with Azure and we directly with that. The translation of the bank accounts.
Yeah.
It's not working. The move like
Okay. I don't foresee it being a problem.
we looked around, there isn't a lot of institutions that are doing Azure.
We've got a couple.
Few around.
Yeah, we've got a couple. That we worked with on. What other integration pieces? So we talked about authentication a little bit. What
We're
other?
365 institution, so a lot of our stuff is, but it's working.
It is working.
Yeah.
Okay. But the Google Drive isn't working?
Yeah.
Okay.
Been doing back and forth with them.
Okay.
It was working before this last update, and all of a sudden,
Let me just say one thing about these pieces that I'm kind of asking about to figure out how you're configured, how you expect them to work. So let me just give you a sense of how that sort of would work on our team. We talked a bit about, we're all full-time staff. We don't kick you to a help desk somewhere else and then back to us. When you submitted support case or if you call the emergency line for something, you're talking to one of our full-time staff. In this case, you would immediately on that, if you submitted something or if we decided to tackle that project, you would immediately be working with one of two staff who that's pretty much what they do is the integration pieces. They work with all the authentication, they work with the APIs, they're constantly in there like keeping track of all of those pieces, changing out, what do we just have? SAML certificates were about to expire a couple weeks ago, and so they coordinated that to get everyone's research done. So you would work directly with them on our team to work through those problems and get that standing up.
well, that's why I asked about this. As it is, it's something even look at that. And it's very difficult. Takes me a week or so for them to read it, then follow, then go another week, then all the information, get another follow.
Yeah.
And I think that's not that it's me using it to the next element, but that's a determinant factor of the SLAs of
Yeah.
the next elements, how responsive they are to our issue. That would be.
And I will say that is the thing that we bring to the table. I mean, that is one of our number ones is our responsiveness. So, and Mark can give you names of people to talk to about that. If you want more technical people, I mean, they're going to get kind of a general, we're welcome to pass you some technical people as well on the IT side. You mentioned the LTI for course evaluations. We talked a bit about Zoom because I think you guys did some testing maybe with Zoom because there's two options there, the plugin and the LTI. What other types of integrations? We talked Google Drive and 365. What was that? Excellent. Okay. Anything else? Anything on the horizon?
We'd we've looked at a learning record store
Yeah.
and but having one integrated into our system.
Awesome. Have you looked specifically at some of the tools or?
One. Which company, the open source one that we were last time around? They are one of the major players.
Okay. Yet is the only one that's stuck in my brain at the moment, but there's about 3 or 4 that we work with, talk to, coordinate with. Yeah, that's exciting. I like to do that. Anything else? Integration wise, plug-in wise.
You know, the PowerPoint would you work?
I don't think we don't have anything sort of extra that's ours that's built in there. You have something?
So we convert the PowerPoint to single file.
Mhm.
We have ice cream control.
Okay.
We've seen another elements just about it. I mean, the PowerPoint just about it.
Yeah.
Right, about it.
And then it creates the video file. Yeah, I don't think we have anybody that has a drop converter in. Anything else on integration? I know that was the core of what we wanted to talk about here, more of the technical pieces.
Yeah, this last question, do you charge when we have issues with this integration?
Yeah. And like the example that I gave about the institution who completely changed their SIS over the break, that was part of their integration. So that wasn't something that we backed up and charged them for.
And we can provide you with the SLAs, but, you know, as a rule, and I know you're going to want to talk to references, we stand here and say, but again, we're service oriented, so that is what we look at. For those that were new, that last audit that we did, you know, we're 58 minutes as average response time to close our tickets. So a lot of times when we talk to folks who have some of the other providers, yours included, you know, we hear that it's a week and a half, but sometimes never from a support perspective. And our reputation is responsiveness, and you know, we're tracking those audits, and then we can sit here and say it till we're blue in the face, but we want you to hear it from clients as far as that goes. But if we're service oriented, and that is our focus. And we're happy to provide other folks for you to talk to, but we don't want those things to go on and we do get them resolved. Other questions?
Do you have any customization like the Google Grader for the discussion? Because very few of our instructors use the whole thing. Like, it doesn't have the next grading functions.
So we have not built our own, but we do have clients who use the ones that Google Rooms provides to them. So the advanced forum and the dual grader as well.
Is that extra?
Our process, again, for plugins is we have an unlimited plugin model. So if it's been, you know, in those cases, it's contributed to the Moodle community. So whoever contributes that, we have an unlimited Moodle plugin. There's no list of Moodle plugins that are allowed or some that aren't. If there's a plugin that's out there that you would want to take advantage of, we will use that. So we have folks who have decided to continue to move those or use those, and folks that have used other options. Okay.
To clarify a little bit, so the Moodle Rooms Grader and Forum are both open source. They are proprietary. They aren't pulling on the ropes and sharing them with anybody who wants to use them from the users.
You will want to look at it and make sure that there is not something that they've left out of what they've provided back to the open source community. But we do have several clients who it did the pieces that they needed it to do. Does that make sense?
You don't know the titles of the plugins that they're making public. Because I never can get hold of them.
Jewel Grader.
They're calling it Jewel.
It's called Jewel Grader. And they've just recently changed Advanced Forum to Google Rooms Forum.
For us, they've changed it's Google Rooms Grader, not Jewel Grader.
And it may be that there's an update that I just haven't paid attention to. The rest of the team may have. I just know the last time I worked with it, it was bad, but it may have already been made. Yeah. But they do make those available to the community. All right. Any other questions there? I think we were gonna shift gears a little and talk student retention, success, analytics, competencies, mobile, those things. Yeah. All right. Pulling up a couple of things. That's why I'm blanked my screen out.
So you said our servers are our own entities?
So we keep you, we run in Amazon Web Services and you're in your own VPC. So you are in your own cloud environment, just you, not shared.
So can we install snapshots, like starting a plugin, we didn't like it, can we convert back and these snapshots?
In that particular case, we don't usually roll back that way. But we do, I mean, you do have full backups. Mark probably has that in whatever proposal information you have. But we do run backups every 4 hours. It's,
Okay, it's not in time.
yeah.
And how far back can you keep it?
2 weeks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Just pulling up a couple of examples of a few things. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Any questions, especially for those that just came in? It's earlier, but as Courtney's putting that together, some of the follow-up maybe to the plugin discussion. Again, our eThink filing, because you're on your a separate code base, is an unlimited plugin model. So whatever plugins are out there, it's not a subset of plugins. We provide our training materials. We covered earlier. Unlimited reports out of Moodle, so if something's in Moodle, we make it our business pull that out. So just trying to take anything that's related to Moodle and build upon that. So.
Can you talk a little bit about competency days? We'll be in the session this afternoon too, so I don't want to redo it, but did you address competency days?
Not in detail. I think that's
what I'm pulling up right now.
That's now. You're here at the right time, so perfect. So we'll talk definitely about that and some of the types of things that were covered there. But just wanted to make sure to backtrack for people that weren't here at the first session as to, again, the approach that we take, and again, where we think it's different. And I've been here for 3 years, and we've had probably over 100 clients migrate to us. So I think from a Moodle partner perspective, we've never had anybody, and that's, I sometimes can't believe, but nobody has ever left eThink to go to any other Moodle provider. So nobody says, I think we can do better as far as the support, the timeliness of how we address things. And so we stand by that. And although there's quite a few who have come from other systems to us, not at all the other way. So, and that's what I said, we'll put you in touch with those people. I mentioned Henry Ford Community College with Moodle Rooms. They were looking at their options, chose us. Jackson Community College, big community colleges that are out there that I've worked with. Again, we want to make sure, can we take what you know today about Moodle and we build upon that and make that a better situation? That's our goal in the discussions we're having today. So, Courtney, all ready? Or
Yeah, I think so.
other questions as she's pulling some tabs together and things like that? folks are interested in competency-based or?
We have some instructors down like our healthcare program. We're trying to, they're being pushed, you know, they are pushing themselves to move for competency. So that's one of the places we've had it. They're using the database activity, trying to have that database activity where you can customize it. How about H5P? Yeah.
Right, we'll cover some of that as we take a look at some of the information there. So we're going to do that from 11 to 11:30 or so.
All right.
Good to go?
Yeah, I think so.
It'll take a moment for,
Okay. So we'll start with competencies and wherever you guys want to take this, I'm happy to do it. My apologies, I get really geeked out about competencies. One of my colleagues and I have been doing several presentations on this, so I'd like to send you the link to one of the recordings for after if you guys want to take a deeper look at that, just to kind of have that. So we have been working a lot with different institutions who are looking at competency-based education and how they might incorporate that into what they're doing currently. As you know, Moodle has incorporated into core its own competency framework and learning plans. Have you guys toyed with it much? Sort of wrestled it? Okay. Are there specific questions or pieces you want me to talk to, or is it going to be more helpful just to see some example stuff? Or
However you want to do it, I mean, you can kind of give an overview from your perspective. If we're new to it, it's not like you know exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
So it might not encourage.
okay. Yeah, absolutely. So I pulled up a couple of examples. The ones I'm going to show I don't think are fully spun up, just based on what I pulled this morning. Augie I haven't done the work. One of my other team members has been working with them. And let me show you what they have, kind of give you a sense of what they've been wrestling with here. So they have a clinical program in their athletic training program, and so they were wanting to do their MSAT clinical proficiencies in here to see what that might look like, what that possibility is. So very similar to what you described. You've got this department or this program, and they're really interested in this. The approach that we've been taking with all of our clients on this is we're happy to sit down and brainstorm through this and look at what what the faculty department has pulled together and help you think through what the best approach is to this. So that's another piece to what my team does is in terms of our support. That's part of our support and what we do with you guys. So just to put that into perspective about why am I even talking about all of these. So with this one, they obviously have this printed list. Basically what they usually do is they have a rubric. The rubric has for each of the pieces that the student needs to demonstrate, there are 3 different segments to it. So one of the approaches that they considered taking was tying this down into courses. So when we're talking about competencies in Moodle, just to backtrack a minute for everyone, what they chose to do, the way that they implemented it was that you can build any number of competency frameworks within the system. You can build those at the site level, you can build those at the category level. Once you've built out the framework, you then can go into courses and tie to the competencies that are going to be covered in the courses. And then as you add activities and resources to the course, you can tie them to those as well. There's flexibility in what you want it to trigger. So for example, kind of thinking about the way it's mapped down, I could have a situation where an assignment gets submitted, it gets graded, and then all that really happens is that it tells the competency framework that that assignment is sitting out there, and then a reviewer can go in and look at it and put in the marks and the review comments. I will say that most of the time, people prefer the approach where it will automatically trigger all the way up, just because it puts less work on the individuals doing it. So what you see here is this one is nested. So in this athletic training clinical proficiency, there's a ligament stress test on the ankle. And then as you can see here, the execution, the competence, and the application are all under it. Now, I mentioned that they have a rubric. They were filling out, they paper fill out this rubric for all three of those criteria. So the first thing that they thought through was that they could just create an assignment with the rubric and do it that way and let it automatically trigger. They're still working through what they're going to do, but they have almost come down to the approach where these competencies will be in the learning plan, and the reviewer will go directly in there, mark the rating, and put in the comments, so that it's all actually being done as part of the learning plan. So kind of bypassing the need or the use of those sort of automatic triggers and pulling in from a specific course.
I've got a question. What happens if the student does an assignment X and it's supposed to be competency like the ankle, okay? And they don't do it right and they fail, okay? Then what do the instructors do then? Do they allow that assignment to be redone and redone in order to feedback through and finally make that competency met? Or is there at some point in time then a physical intervention by the instructor that manually marks it complete? They've done something. I mean, how do they manage that?
With a variety of approaches. So they do have scenarios, and obviously in competency-based education, you want students to be able to move as quickly as they are comfortable and have mastery of the knowledge. So it really depends on kind of what level you're talking about. In this case, if they fail it the first time, they redo it. In some of the cases, the student, if it's automatically flowing in and they fail it, it sort of sits as a failure, but then the student can go into their learning plan and they can then upload additional evidence and then request a review. And then that triggers their reviewer to go back in and take a look at the updated evidence, make comment, and adjust that marking.
So it's the evidence.
Yeah, so the evidence review, I think, probably where just in that snapshot you would probably head. So this is another example, just to kind of give you another one to see or think about. So they've been using TaskStream for their education department for a really long time. And they didn't feel like it was doing what they needed it to. It was not a good fit anymore for them. So we worked with them to help them move their teacher licensure portfolio structure into a competency framework. So what you see here, the P1 learner and learning with the S1s under it, the P2 content knowledge, all of those, and the P3 professional responsibility. They opted to, instead of like the other one where they created just the learning plan and they're managing it independent of courses, this college decided what they wanted to do is have a teacher portfolio course. So all of their students who are putting together the licensure portfolio are put into a course in Moodle for it, and then that course has all of the assignments that are tied to all of these competencies. And so that gives them that flexibility to use the rubric and those pieces for the assignments, the assignment rating workflow and some of those pieces to handle the review process for some of these. And let's see. I haven't been in their site. They just changed their name. I haven't been in here in a while, so. Jump into a learning plan. So unless they've done something drastic, yes. You can see that all of they're a technical college, and all of their programs and courses are set up and tied to these competency frameworks. So theirs is pretty extensive. And as you notice, they're not doing the learning plans pieces. They're using this just for the competency part. They're not tying it into.
They're doing a hot course, right?
They are.
When you collapse out,
Yeah.
choice by course.
So there's for tracking the competencies.
So how do you get, you can get the competency breakout report correct for each one. How can you get that out of your system in like a spreadsheet format? Because we have accrediting bodies that want to see that data. You know, it's all well and good for learners to be able to see it, the instructors to be able to see it, but it needs to be distributed to other sources. For situations. So how do you go about pulling those competency reports out of the?
So there are a couple of other plugins that we've installed for some of our institutions. They're using those because they like the display and the way it pulls down. And then we've also been working on our own set of some custom reports to add into sites. One of the things I talked about earlier, and we'll look at again in a few minutes or this afternoon in the last session, but one of the things we do is create custom reports for our institutions. And so we've been working on a couple of those to get that information out.
But natively, there really isn't a way, right?
Yeah.
I mean, which is interesting, that it was not just eThink, the Moodle, it's the whole set, that they built this whole system that can get extremely sophisticated, but then there's no way to pull the data in easy format, like your user report where you can just get this PDF file. Now, you would just think that there would be, that would be the piece of the puzzle that was like, why did they quit? Why did anybody quit without having a reporting piece to put out?
Yeah, as part of the spec, to design the system.
Yeah.
Report should have been, part of that project. But as Courtney said, our approach is we allow the configurable report writer, and I think in the past, Moodle Rooms has not enabled that. Sometimes it's because it's running across all of the Moodle sites and it pulls the system to its knees in their case. But we can run that against your system. So from a configurable report perspective, our approach is if there's anything you want out of Moodle, we understand the table structures and where that data resides. So we'll build that report, and then that report you can export in any fashion that you want. So Courtney is one of the people that takes on the challenges of, okay, I want this report, and this is what I want in it, and we'll build that, put it on the menu for you so you can run that. You test it to make sure it's what you're after. But at eThink, it's more of an unlimited reporting model that says if the data is somewhere in there, it should have been thought of, like you said, but we will be able to pull that out. And because we're building that report, maybe format it in exactly the format that's necessary.
Do you have any institutions who are building out the competencies across the entire program? And of course, it's studied from student entering the program to student leaving the program. That's kind of our goal.
Yeah. have one. They've talked about it. I can ask
No, I
the
was
team and
just kind
see.
of curious. In other words, we're not really behind in our pursuits because there are a lot of folks that are doing that approach. Is that correct? So our vision is that as a student comes in, maybe competency A might be partially attacked in the first course, it might be the 10th course, and on the 15th. That competency truly isn't met until you get to the last course that contains those skills. So we're thinking of it going across the program and trying to make that run that way. We're thinking that's our goal.
Right.
We're not going to get there right at first. We know that. We're going to start small, but that's our ultimate plan,
Right.
is to make it go across the whole entire program.
Right, absolutely. And that's why I say I don't think we've had anybody who's done that yet. But I think that part of them are scaffolding in those pieces, with that being their sort of goal out there. There are a couple of other, I don't know how technical you want to get or how deep in here you want to get, but we do have some examples. Like I mentioned, maybe I'll just share that webinar recording with you if you want to take a look at it at some point. But one of the interesting things is this idea that they built in here, and you've probably already seen it. But when you create the competencies, you can have them met in a variety of ways. So we've looked a lot back to thinking about. We were having a conversation earlier about professional development and continuing education and those pieces. And we have a couple that are working on setups towards this idea of a points-based competency framework. So where the student basically has choices about the types of activities that they want to achieve in the course. So thinking about competency ed, a student who may be a poor writer or one who's more of a visual learner and wants to take different approaches. Depending on how you set it up, you can have those competencies have differing point values, and then they're basically working to achieve a certain threshold of points for them to move on to the next or to have achieved that competence. So some interesting kind of options in there that don't limit you to just a straight line sort of path there. I know that we had a couple of other things on the list here. We've been talking about competencies. I did just want to show you, we mentioned a teleboard earlier, so I thought I would pull them up. When you're talking about the competency pieces, this is their demo site. Take a quick peek here. So I should have pulled up Mike that has this. So IntelliBoard is basically an analytics package that works with your institution's Google site. So we have a partnership with them. We can provide like a baseline of set of reports for free. We install it for you and get it configured, and then begin to look at it. Obviously, if you like it, it's working for you, you want to extend what you have in terms of capacity with them, or number of reports, or requesting custom reports from them, you can obviously engage them. We work really easy with them. They'll just tell us adjustments that you need made, and we'll make them, and then you'll have their full package there. But this just allows you to have access to additional reports and analytics and those pieces. I know that some of theirs, because we worked with them to develop them, but they have a whole set around competencies as well. So we see pulling in that information about the competencies and the description for it, and the direct link to the evidence and when it was created. Competencies by course. So being able to do that aggregate kind of stats, which I think, to your point, is what you were looking for. So This is paid. So we basically do their baseline package. They let us give it to all of our clients. It's like a set of half dozen of their most standard reports.
So the competencies would be part of that.
I don't think the competencies is.
So, okay, so what's the advantage of using a tunnel board as opposed to your internal service? What would be the
Preference.
And teleport costs money though.
IntelliBoard costs money. We provide the reports that we generate are part of our support package. Some people prefer the way this looks. They do in here, so our reports are basically pull reports. So you would go in and pull the data. Theirs has some additional capabilities to be able to, set triggers and have it send automatically to a certain set of people and those types of things.
So it's mainly user interface. Kind of, because this is probably more for the untrained end user that wants to pull reports as a customer. Whereas what you're talking about is you would probably work with like Tarek or IT person and explaining him how to get the kind of reports you need to get, like which database.
They're front end. So if we built you a competency report, so let's say, we were building out one and this is what we wanted, we would have that in your site so that whoever had access to it would be able to go in and pull it.
Separate from the board, it would just be
Right.
a report link on the.
Yeah.
I like to think of ours as if the data is in Moodle, we're pulling raw data.
Right.
We're just pulling, I sometimes think of it as tabular, but it gets at what you're looking for, a listing of every place that occurs. I think some of the IntelliBoard is more of what it looks like. There's a little bit more graphics in some cases on their dashboards, et cetera. But if specifically you want just a list of where things have been accomplished or whatever, then typically our unlimited reporting model, you just say, eThink build me this report, and we'll go ahead and do it.
Is your native activity report about the same or different?
I don't know if I've seen that exact report, so.
Yeah, a lot.
We may need to take a look at it and just verify the log structure is the same between them. I don't know if they've made any changes to the presentation of it or.
Just looks to pull down menu and choose their report.
For the logs.
When you pull up the report, the reason I ask is that sometimes that report is a little bit difficult for instructors to understand. I mean, it gives you can see it is good and then it says, the student submitted the quiz at this time, but some of the more detailed information, it's connected to behind the scenes ID numbers, like user with this ID, but it's not the ID that you see up front, and it's a behind the scenes number. Did this action with this item, and then there's the behind the scenes ID number for the item, and so they don't really know what any of that part means. Is it about the same?
Yeah, the log store is about the same. If there are specific things that your faculty are digging in the logs for that we should pull up to the surface, we do these course level reports as well. So, forum posts, I think I showed one of the forum aggregate reports earlier. So this is an example for you, just to kind of give you a sense. So this is an example of a custom report that we built. Just trying to get it to where you can kind of see all of it in one shot. So this one, again, is a site level report. We do these at varying levels, but this will just begin to give you a sense of the type of information we're able to aggregate. So in this one, what it's doing is it's pulling obviously the course and the category and the start date. It's telling us whether that course is visible or not, the number of students who are enrolled, the instructor or instructors, depending, the instructor's last access to the course. And then their elapsed days, so how many days since the instructor was in. So we've got a lot of institutions who people spend a lot of time going into courses to make sure that faculty are present and engaged for online courses, and so this cuts down on that time significantly. Then for this report, they also needed the syllabus information. So this is pulling the name of the syllabus and what resource type it's using. So is it a file? Is it using the book, module? Or are they doing something else with it? And then when was the syllabus modified? And again, the next piece to this one for this client is that they also needed the last attendance date taken. So that's another one of their indicators that the faculty member is sort of like alive and engaged in the course. And so we pull over that last attendance date for them as well. So this just kind of maybe begins to give you an example, some of that.
So as you see this as a client, you could then potentially say, I love that column, I don't need this column, and again, it's not that this is the only, or the final end product. So you can say, submit a support ticket to just say, I love that report, but could you make these changes, and can you find this information? So we try to make sure that we're getting you the data that you want, so you don't have to know where it's located. Other questions, comments?
How do you look at students? Can you look at students?
Yeah.
You need to sign out or just have some possibility to click X now. Because in the motor rules, we have to sign in and out. This got to
Take on the role of a student.
To actually do the login as.
Sign in as.
Yeah.
As administrators, we can sign in as students. Well, in order for us to get out of this, we have to sign out and then we need to log in.
Yeah, that was actually a security change that got made to core rule about 1.9 or 2 something. It was a security issue.
It was a little bit easier to old way, but
Yeah. Yeah, the old way was easier.
yeah.
But less secure,
Yeah.
so there's your trade-off, I guess. I was gonna pull up another couple of examples, but I you know, there's a couple more in here. Some of the ones that I have in my mind that are either in my mind or actually written that need to be created. But again, this is the type of work that we do as a team. Has to try and get you that information in that form that you need. Any other questions?
This is off topic from competencies, but do you guys have like other clients that you work with that have switched from programs to you? If they're using Kaltura, what have you done or what they have to do? Are the links just broken? Do you have a way with Kaltura to so that yeah.
So we haven't had any issues of anything breaking. So essentially what happens, just to kind of broad stroke here, if you guys were to want to come over to us, we basically would request a full site backup of everything in your Moodle site right now. And they would give us that backup and we would bring it up in our environment. One of the things among many that we end up doing is basically a full find and replace. So if you have any hard links into your Moodle root URL, those would get changed. All the pointers get sort of readjusted that need to get readjusted to make sure that it's all looking to your accounts and your LTIs and all those things.
Yeah, and again, I'll work with Stephanie or whomever to provide references where you want to talk to those folks. I think we said earlier, it is 60, and we kind of know our numbers, but 60 clients that we have who have come over from motor rooms. So we can put you in touch. We try to match up sometimes, you know, what their previous LMS was, what their SIS is, size, you know, appropriate, what type of individuals you would want to talk to, but we certainly would be happy to provide references. There might have been a reference list that we've given at one point in time that I could pull back. But, you know, if you want to talk to them about the process and what that looks like, we also had a recording. I think we've done it a couple different times the last couple of years. Is a recording of people who have made migrations, just kind of going through an interview process on a webinar as to what was the process like, what's it been like since, you know, resources that can kind of, you know, again, so you can hear it from other people.
I think from my standpoint, from faculty and people I've been dealing with, right now the main thing is for them is the advanced forum and being able to create the advanced forum. Now I know we have our sandbox site. Is there a way you guys put that plug in that site so that we can add?
I did.
You already did already. Add the movers or the graders and children.
Oh, yeah, let me get up to add the grader for you. Yeah.
Because we'd like to be able to see that.
Yeah.
Because like I said, that's a key function of some of our faculty. That would be a big bump.
Okay. Yeah, we'll communicate and make sure that we know that those are both in there. We'll put that, we'll add that in the sandbox so that it'll be there so you can see that. If they're used to that, you don't want to take a step in the other direction. Perfect. Other questions that you might have?
You guys look exhausted.
It's a long
It's
morning.
terrible sitting here listening to me all day.